Welcome to our exploration of the fascinating world of thinking and cognition. In this video, we'll journey through the mental processes that shape how we solve problems, make decisions, and use language. From the basics of categorizing information to the complexities of creative and critical thinking, we'll uncover the strategies and biases that influence our minds every day. Whether you're curious about how we form ideas or why we sometimes make errors in judgment, this guide will provide a comprehensive overview. Let's begin by understanding what thinking really means and why it's central to human intelligence. One of the first steps in thinking is categorization, and prototypes play a crucial role. A prototype is a mental image or the best example of a category. For instance, when you think of a bird, you might picture a robin, which serves as your prototypical bird. This mental shortcut helps us quickly sort new items into categories. If you see a feathered creature, you compare it to your prototype to decide if it's a bird. This process is efficient, but it can sometimes lead to oversimplification or errors when an item doesn't fit the prototype perfectly. Algorithms are methodical, logical rules or procedures that guarantee a solution to a problem. Think of them as step-by-step instructions, like trying every possible combination on a lock. While algorithms are reliable and always lead to the correct answer if followed correctly, they can be slow and require significant effort. In contrast, we often use faster, less reliable shortcuts called heuristics. Understanding the difference between these approaches is key to mastering problem solving. Heuristics are simple thinking strategies that help us make judgments and solve problems efficiently. Unlike algorithms, heuristics are usually faster but more error-prone. For example, you might use the rule, if it looks like a duck, it probably is a duck, instead of checking every detail. Heuristics save time and mental energy, but they can lead to mistakes, especially when we rely on them in complex situations. Recognizing when to use heuristics versus algorithms is an important skill in everyday life. Sometimes solutions come to us suddenly and unexpectedly. This is known as insight, a sudden and often novel realization of the solution to a problem. Unlike step-by-step strategies, insight feels like an aha moment where everything clicks into place. It's a powerful experience that contrasts with more deliberate strategy-based problem solving. Insight often occurs after a period of incubation, when our minds unconsciously process information. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for information that supports our preconceptions and to ignore or distort contradictory evidence. This bias can affect how we interpret news, make decisions, and even remember events. For example, if you believe a certain diet works, you might focus on success stories and overlook failures. Being aware of confirmation bias helps us seek balanced evidence and make more objective judgment. Fixation is the inability to see a problem from a new perspective, often because we're stuck in a particular mental set. A mental set is a tendency to approach a problem in one specific way, usually a method that worked before. While this can be helpful, it can also prevent us from finding better solutions. Overcoming fixation requires flexibility and openness to new strategies, which is essential for creative problem solving. Functional fixedness is the tendency to think of things only in terms of their usual functions, which can impede problem solving. For example, in Dunker's candle problem, many people fail to see a box as anything other than a container for tacks, missing its potential as a candle holder. Overcoming functional fixedness means thinking outside the box, literally and figuratively, to find creative uses for everyday objects. Convergent thinking is the process of deriving the single best or correct answer to a clearly defined problem. It's measured by standardized tests like IQ exams and relies on logic, speed, and accuracy. For example, solving what is 7x8 requires convergent thinking. This style is analytical and logical, focusing on finding one solution. It's essential for tasks that demand precision and clarity. Divergent thinking is about generating multiple possible solutions to an open-ended problem. It's a core component of creativity and is assessed through tasks like listing as many uses for a brick as possible. Divergent thinking is evaluated on fluency, flexibility, originality, and elaboration. This exploratory associative style encourages thinking outside the box and is vital for innovation and creative problem solving. Critical thinking is the disciplined process of actively and skillfully analyzing, evaluating, and synthesizing information. It involves questioning assumptions, detecting logical fallacies, and appraising evidence quality. Key skills include argument analysis, inference evaluation, and both deductive and inductive reasoning. Critical thinking is essential for making informed decisions and is placed at the top of Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive complexity. Creative thinking is the ability to produce ideas or solutions that are both novel and useful. According to Wallace's first-stage model, creativity involves preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. Preparation means immersing yourself in the problem, incubation is unconscious processing, illumination is the sudden insight, and verification is testing and refining the idea. Creative thinking drives innovation and helps us solve complex challenges. Abstract thinking involves reasoning about ideas, principles, and relationships not tied to specific instances, such as justice or freedom. Concrete thinking, on the other hand, focuses on tangible, immediate objects and events. Huygens argued that formal operational thinking, which emerges around age 12, marks the onset of mature abstract reasoning. Both types of thinking are important, depending on the context and task. Solving problems often involves choosing between algorithms and heuristics. Algorithms are step-by-step procedures that guarantee a correct solution but can be time-consuming. Heuristics are mental shortcuts that provide quick, good-enough solutions but may fail. The choice between these strategies depends on the problem's complexity and the need for speed versus accuracy. Understanding both approaches helps us tackle challenges more effectively. Means-end analysis is a problem-solving strategy where you compare your current state with your goal state and identify the differences. You then select actions that reduce these differences, setting up sub-goals if needed. This recursive process continues until the goal is reached. The Tower of Hanoi problem is a classic demonstration of means-end analysis, showing how breaking down a problem into manageable steps leads to success. Working backward strategy involves starting from the desired goal and working toward the initial state. This approach is especially useful when the goal is well-defined but the starting conditions are complex. For example, in maze solving, beginning at the exit can simplify the search for a path. Working backward helps clarify the steps needed to reach a solution. Illogical reasoning involves applying a solution from a known problem to a new problem that shares structural similarity. For example, Jick and Hollyoak study showed that participants who read a military analogy were more likely to solve a medical problem using a similar strategy. Recognizing deep structural correspondences rather than surface features is key to successful analogical reasoning. Mental set is the tendency to approach new problems using strategies that worked in the past, even when they are no longer optimal. Luchin's water jug problems demonstrated that people often stick to complex formulas even when simpler solutions exist. This Einstellung effect can limit our ability to adapt and find better answers. Overcoming mental set requires flexibility and willingness to try new approaches. Functional fixedness is the inability to perceive an object as having a function beyond its typical use. Dunker's candle problem illustrates this. Most participants failed to see a box as a potential candle holder, viewing it only as a container for tacks. When the tacks were presented outside the box, success rates increased, showing how changing presentation can overcome fixedness. Creative thinking helps us break free from these constraints. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, and recall information in a way that confirms one's pre-existing beliefs. Watson's 246 task demonstrated that participants often test only hypotheses consistent with their initial guess, rather than seeking to falsify them. This bias can distort our thinking and lead to poor decisions. Being aware of confirmation bias is crucial for objective reasoning. Anchoring bias occurs when we rely too heavily on the first piece of information encountered, the anchor when making subsequent judgments. For example, people give lower estimates for Turkey's population when first anchored at 5 million than at 65 million. Anchoring effects are robust and influence decisions in salary negotiations, real estate, and pricing. Recognizing anchoring bias helps us make more accurate judgment. Availability heuristic is judging the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. Dramatic events like plane crashes or shark attacks are overestimated because they're vivid and memorable, often amplified by media coverage. This heuristic can lead to distorted perceptions of risk and frequency. Understanding the availability heuristic helps us make more balanced decisions. Representativeness heuristic involves judging the probability that something belongs to a category based on how closely it resembles the prototype. This can lead to base rate neglect, where prior probabilities are ignored. The Linda the bank teller example shows how people violate probability rules by focusing on similarity rather than logic. Recognizing this heuristic helps us avoid common errors in judgment. Metacognition refers to our awareness and understanding of our own cognitive processes. Introduced by John Flavel, it includes metacognitive knowledge, what we know about cognition and our abilities, and metacognitive regulation, the ability to monitor and control our thinking. Skills like planning, monitoring, and evaluating are crucial for academic achievement and effective learning. Metacognition helps us become better learners and thinkers. Metacognitive regulation involves planning, monitoring, and evaluating our cognitive processes. Planning means selecting strategies and allocating resources before a task. Monitoring is ongoing awareness of comprehension and performance during a task. Evaluating is appraising the outcome and the efficiency of the strategy used. These skills are linked to academic achievement and are key targets in educational intervention. Judgment of learning, JOL, is a metacognitive judgment about how well material has been learned. Delayed JOLs made after a delay are more accurate than immediate JOLs, a phenomenon known as the delayed JOL effect. This skill helps learners assess their understanding and adjust their study strategies for better retention and performance. Feeling of knowing, FOK, is the subjective sense that you could recognize or recall an item even though it cannot currently be retrieved. This tip-of-the-tongue state is common and predicts recognition accuracy above chance. Understanding FOK helps us appreciate the nuances of memory and retrieval processes. Dunning-Kruger effect is a metacognitive failure where people with low competence overestimate their performance, while high-competence individuals slightly underestimate theirs. This occurs because the skills needed to produce correct responses are also needed to evaluate them. Training improves both performance and the ability to recognize deficits. The effect is moderated by culture and is not simply about stupid people thinking they are geniuses. Calibration refers to the degree to which confidence in one's answers matches actual accuracy. Overconfidence bias occurs when people are more confident than accurate. Improving metacognitive calibration is a goal of many study skills programs, helping learners become more realistic about their abilities and performance. Cognition encompasses all mental processes, from low-level perception to high-level reasoning. Different types of thinking, convergent, divergent, critical, creative, abstract, concrete, are deployed depending on task demands. We organize knowledge through concepts and categories which support efficient thinking and communication. Problem-solving uses strategies from algorithms to heuristics, with specialized techniques like means-end analysis and analogy. Cognitive biases such as confirmation bias, anchoring, availability, and representativeness heuristics, mental set, and functional fixedness systematically distort thinking. Metacognition allows us to monitor and regulate these processes, and its failure leads to effects like the Dunning-Kruger effect. Awareness of biases and metacognitive skills is essential for improving judgment and decision-making. Several researchers have shaped our understanding of thinking and cognition. Guilford distinguished convergent and divergent thinking. Roche developed prototype theory. Newell and Simon introduced means-end analysis. Dunker explored functional fixedness. Luchin studied mental set. Tversky and Kahneman investigated heuristics and biases. Flavel created the metacognition framework. Wallace described the 4 stages of creative thinking. Their contributions form the foundation of modern cognitive psychology. Decision-making is the cognitive process of selecting a course of action from multiple alternatives. The rational model assumes decision-makers are fully informed, logically consistent, and aim to maximize outcomes. Expected utility theory evaluates options by multiplying the probability of each outcome by its utility, then summing across outcomes. In practice, human decision-making often violates these assumptions, leading to the study of heuristics and bounded rationality. Dual process theory distinguishes between 2 modes of thinking, System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, intuitive, and operates automatically, relying on heuristics and pattern recognition. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and allocates attention to effortful mental activities. Most judgment errors arise when people rely on System 1 in situations that require careful analysis by System 2. Understanding these systems helps us recognize when to slow down and think more critically. Herbert Simon challenged the rational model, arguing that humans cannot optimize as expected utility theory prescribes. Our rationality is bounded by limited cognitive capacity, limited information, and limited time. Instead of maximizing, we often satisfice, searching until we find a good enough option. Chronic maximizers experience more regret and less satisfaction than satisficers, even with better outcomes. Bounded rationality explains why we rely on heuristics. Gudrunser proposed that heuristics are not flaws but adaptive tools that exploit the structure of the environment. Fast and frugal heuristics can outperform complex models in uncertain environments, demonstrating the less is more effect. Ecological rationality highlights how simple strategies can be effective when matched to the context, challenging the idea that more information always leads to better decisions. Tversky and Kahneman identified the availability and representativeness heuristics as systematic mental shortcuts used under uncertainty. Availability involves estimating frequency based on ease of recall, while representativeness judges category membership based on similarity to a prototype. Both heuristics can lead to errors, such as overestimating rare events or neglecting base rates. Recognizing these shortcuts helps us make more accurate judgment. Anchoring and adjustment is a heuristic where estimates start from an initial value and adjust from it, but adjustments are often insufficient. Recognition heuristic involves choosing between alternatives based on familiarity. Both heuristics are robust and influence decisions in various domains, such as pricing, negotiations, and judgments about unfamiliar options. Understanding these heuristics helps us avoid common pitfalls. Framing effect shows that the way a problem is worded can systematically alter choices, even when outcomes are identical. For example, people are risk-averse when options are framed as gains and risk-seeking when framed as losses. This violates the rational principle of description invariance. Framing effects are powerful and influence decisions in health, finance, and everyday life. Sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue investing in a losing course of action because of resources already spent, even though those costs are irrecoverable. Rational decision-making requires evaluating only future costs and benefits. Examples include finishing a bad movie or continuing a failing project. Recognizing sunk costs helps us make better decisions and avoid waste. Overconfidence bias occurs when people's subjective confidence in their judgments exceeds their objective accuracy. This bias has 3 forms: overestimation, overplacement, and overprecision. Calibration studies show that people are often less accurate than they believe. Overconfidence can lead to poor decisions and risk-taking. Improving calibration helps us become more realistic and effective thinkers. Hindsight bias is the tendency to believe, after learning the outcome of an event, that we would have predicted it. This "I knew it all along" effect distorts memory of prior predictions and is problematic in legal and medical settings. Recognizing hindsight bias helps us maintain objectivity and avoid unfair judgments. Prospect theory developed by Kahneman and Tversky describes decision-making under risk. Key principles include reference dependence, loss aversion, diminishing sensitivity, and probability weighting. Losses loom larger than equivalent gains and people overweight small probabilities. Prospect theory explains why we reject fair bets and buy lottery tickets, providing a realistic model of human decision-making. Rational model describes how people should decide, while prospect theory and the heuristics and biases program describe how people actually decide. Simon's bounded rationality explains why we deviate, and Kahneman's dual process theory explains how. Gudrunser's ecological rationality shows that heuristics are adaptive tools. Understanding these frameworks helps us make better decisions and avoid common pitfalls. Language is constructed from basic sounds called phonemes, which combine to form morphemes, the smallest units of meaning. Semantics refers to the rules for deriving meaning, while syntax governs word order in sentences. These building blocks enable us to communicate complex ideas and share knowledge. Understanding language structure is essential for appreciating how we express and interpret thoughts. Children's language development moves from simplicity to complexity. Infants start without language but soon begin to discriminate speech sounds, marking the start of receptive language. Productive language, the ability to produce words, matures later. Babies enter the babbling stage around 4 months and the one-word stage around their first birthday. Understanding these stages helps us appreciate the remarkable process of language acquisition. Haverst B.F. Skinner believed language development could be explained by familiar learning principles: association, imitation, and reinforcement. Bobbies learn to talk by associating sights with sounds, imitating words and syntax, and receiving positive reinforcement. Skinner's view emphasizes the role of environment and experience in language acquisition, drawing parallels with animal learning. Noam Chomsky argued that language development is natural and occurs given adequate nurture. He proposed the existence of a language acquisition device, a sort of switch box pre-wired in the brain. This device enables us to understand and produce language, suggesting that humans are biologically prepared for language learning. Chomsky's theory highlights the interplay between nature and nurture. Aphasia is an impaired use of language, usually caused by damage to specific cortical areas. Broca's area controls language expression, directing muscle movements involved in speech. Wernicke's area controls language reception, involved in comprehension and expression. Damage to these areas can result in difficulty speaking or understanding language, illustrating the complexity of brain-language connection. Linguist Benjamin Lee Horff contended that language determines the way we think. According to his linguistic determinism hypothesis, different languages impose different conceptions of reality. This idea suggests that the structure and vocabulary of our language shape how we perceive and interpret the world, influencing our thoughts and actions.